how do we do this again? I'm a little out of practice. It's been a little while since we've been doing this. I gotta stretch here and.
What do we talk about here? We talk about Zaboomafoo,
Cyber Chase,
something. Word Girl, I think is.
Yeah. Well.
Yeah. I know what it is.
Oh yeah.
It's Arthur and the Invisibles. It's the Luc Besson animated movie about I think Santa's sidekick or something.
Is that what that's about? Santa's sidekick?
Yeah. I think it's like about like the holiday cryptids. It's like the Easter Bunny and Santa.
Oh, okay. You know what? I think I was confusing that with The Ant Bully. Like I thought it was about insects or something.
The Ant Bully, that's a crazy one. That movie, I remember even as a kid being like, this movie's weird. This is not like Pixar. This is odd.
No,
the Ant Bully
like
has
French.
like a weirdly like it's got like a hateful kind of tone undercurrent. Not to be confused, of course, with Ants, Woody Allen's Ants.
Somehow just as hateful in a different way. No, of course. This is Elwood City Limits, the episodic Arthur podcast. It's been a little while for us in real time, but hopefully you listening at home haven't missed us too much. Will Young here with Lucas Mancini. Lucas, you've been doing your kind of seasonal traveling, but we're finally here to end off the 23rd season of Arthur.
Hard to believe it. It feels like we just got started.
I know.
And we really got it. They're not really seasons, folks. If this is your first episode, once we get to these late era Arthur, basically groups of episodes, it feels like, we're watching a group of 5 episodes or something. A season is a stretch.
I have been taking to calling them the Arthur OVAs after you said that on the show. Like, I really do think that's a wonderful description of what it is we're actually getting into. Yes, these incredibly short seasons. This one's almost done, and you won't believe how short the next season is, so get ready for that. But we have a few things to talk about before we actually get into the show itself. First and foremost, especially if you're listening to this on the Patreon, but if you're listening to this in the month of October, good news, we have once again been nominated for Best Podcast for the Coast Best of Halifax Awards. Thank you everybody so much who has taken the time to nominate us, and that was only half of the battle. Here comes the other half. Now you have to vote for us. So again, you go to the website vote.thecoast.ca. You can now vote for us for Best Podcast in the Arts and Culture category. Now, in order to do that, I will remind you, you will need to create an account. They will prompt you to do this, and you will need a valid Canadian postal code. There are many ways.
In fact, I think better safe than sorry, not just Canadian, but I think an HRM postal code is your best bet. So folks, if you're if you're not in the Halifax Regional Municipality, which, despite not being in the Halifax Regional Municipality, we are a Halifax podcast. We talk about Halifax all the time. I think it's fair you vote for us. You could look up, a McDonald's in HRM, a Tim Hortons. There's lots of them, and those are all valid postal codes. So just look up Halifax Tim Hortons. Use that as your postal code if you're listening to us from outside of the area.
So, yeah, and you can vote for us until Sunday, November 3rd at 11:59 p.m. So that is when the voting ends. And we will hopefully find out about that later in November, maybe December. Things are a little bit weird this year in terms of when things are happening with that voting. But this is our last chance. This is the last time that we're going to be entered into this. And it's a good field this year, for the most part. There are some good podcasts on there that I've listened to. In fact, a friend of mine is nominated in one of the other podcasts. Please vote for me. And if you're listening to this podcast, vote for me. But listen to my friend's podcast about X-Men. So, please, vote.thecoast.ca. If you're listening to this either on the Patreon or the free feed, you have most of the month to vote for us. Please don't waste time. And thank you if you have voted for us. So that's the big one. I wanted to tie up a quick note here that we opened up over a month ago, and it has been resolved since then. The librarians strike that we talked about a couple of times. The strike is over, and the librarians won. So, hooray. We want to express our congratulations to the librarians of Nova Scotia. My wife and I really missed the library when it was gone, and we are loving that it's back and also loving that they got what they wanted from that whole exchange. And now we are going to go over to the emails. We have a few emails here, so let's get through them over at elwoodcitylimits@gmail.com. The first of our emails comes from Ashley Hollingsworth, who says, "Ahoy, Will and Lucas. Just wanted to say, happy anniversary." Yeah. Sorry about getting to this a bit later, Ashley. Congrats on 8 years of Elwood City Limits. Though I found the podcast last year, I'm happy it finally got on my radar because I've enjoyed every single minute of it. I've been a huge fan of Arthur since I was 8 years old, and now in my 30s, I'm glad to find a community of folks who still love and talk about the show. I found the podcast at the right time. I was experiencing a bout of depression and was very stressed about my finances and other personal issues going on at the time. ECL was always a source of comfort. The episode recaps and the conversations that followed allowed me to forget about what was going wrong in my life and instead think about Arthur in an entirely different way. I love how the conversations range from silly to surprisingly deep. I never thought an Arthur podcast would dig deep on social justice issues and LGBT representation. Being a part of the conversation felt like I was hanging out with a group of friends. I also enjoyed learning more about you guys in Halifax over the years. I love hearing your thoughts about what's going on in the news, any movies, TVs, or games that are on your radar. Most importantly, I'm happy that I found a community of cool Arthur fans who appreciate the show and find new ways to look at it. I love rewatching these episodes through an adult lens and seeing what still resonates. Though I will be sad when there is no more Arthur left to talk about, I am looking forward to what you guys will do in the future. All this to say, thank you for the laughs, the good times, and your open and honest conversations about life, Arthur, and beyond. Stay frosty. I kind of wish that, you know, in the more recent years of the podcast, I decided to go back on my rule of like not reading excessive praise on the podcast unless you don't want us to read it. I feel like this is good for both of us to hear, and it was also very complimentary to you, the listener. So thank you.
Especially on the home stretch.
Oh, yes.
And listen, Will, I'm going to use the opportunity to take that prompt of what movies, games, and stuff have we been getting into. Will, you've been a movie maniac lately. I've been following you on Letterboxd. You have been, I think it's because your wife is away, no? And so the wife is away, the boys will play. You have been clocking some stuff on your... So what have you been watching lately that you really enjoyed?
Oh, my word. Well, thank you for asking. It's true. It's because it's yes, my wife is currently away, so I got the Criterion channel for the month, and I've been going through my watch list on all of the Criterion channel movies that are on there. My watch list is getting smaller and smaller, which has been spurring me on to go forward. So I've watched a lot of great things within the past couple of months. Just quickly looking at my Letterboxd diary here. Follow me on Letterboxd, by the way. Finally saw Grave of the Fireflies on Netflix. That was, not a fun time, but it was really, really good. I saw Immaculate on Amazon Prime, which, if you're into horror, was really fun.
Tis the season.
I got the streaming service Mubi to finally watch The Fall, the Tarsem movie, The Fall. Fantastic. Absolutely worth every penny on that one. Really glad that I saw it. I finally got around to seeing Challengers, which I really enjoyed. That's also on Amazon Prime. Luca Guadagnino is my boy now. I've seen a lot more of his recent movies. Really enjoyed it. Today I watched Come and See, which I don't necessarily recommend, but it was a very important movie to watch at this time of our existence. And one final one, especially for you, Lucas, I finally saw my first for real Jackie Chan Chinese action movie, Police Story, and it was it wowed me. It definitely wowed me.
Well, that's an excellent segue into what I've been watching lately.
Yes.
Because, this has been kind of my year of watching Hong Kong and Chinese movies. And, I've been watching movies, in seriousness since I was like 13, and I would get my mom to bring the IMDb 100 home from the library, right? And that was how I kind of started my movie education.
Yeah.
The good, the bad, the ugly, and I was like, wow, movies are awesome. And, I've gotten to the point in my life where I was like, okay, now I'm kind of just watching art movies, and, they're a little bit slower and more to sink your teeth into, until I realized there's this world of Hong Kong and Chinese movies that are the same style of kind of kinetic populism. When I watched Pulp Fiction when I was 14, and it blew my mind, there's hundreds of movies that have that kind of kinetic energy that I've never seen before, and they're so eminently watchable. And it's all these Hong Kong movies. And so I've really been getting into it this year, and you couldn't have picked a better one to start with, Police Story. I recently watched another one of those, Wheels on Meals, which is kind of a more comedic, even more so than Police Story. It's more kind of a slapstick comedy with Jackie Chan and Sammo Hung. And I can't recommend it enough. You were saying you have Movie Will. If you ever get a chance, every single one of the Shaw Brothers movies on Mubi, whether it's, 8 Diagram Pole Fighter or the 5 Deadly Venoms, those movies are like nothing you'll see like anywhere else. Those movies reminded me of like when I saw Star Wars for the first time, where I was like, oh my God, this is like something from another planet. So can't recommend those enough. TV show and games. I've been watching a television show called WWE Raw. I've been really enjoying it.
I think I've heard of this before. Yeah.
And I've actually been, listen, this is against my nature. Usually I'm the movie guy. I've been gaming lately.
All right.
I've been playing some video games. I played Astrobot. Yeah. And I thought it was downright delightful. If you have a PS5, I think it's essential gaming. It's so refreshing to play a game where all the cool costumes and stuff are things you unlock by playing the video game, and not something you have to buy.
Imagine that.
Or a game where, my favorite games are when playing the game is its own reward. It's Super Monkey Ball, probably the best designed game in history, in my opinion, or Soul Calibur 2. Playing the game is its own reward. And Astrobot has reminded me of the far-fledged days of those, so I give it my highest recommendation.
Well, there you go. I've also been playing a couple of games, not as much as usual, but I do have a couple going on in the background. I'm finally getting around to Tunic, which is pretty enjoyable and also has
developed by a Haligonian.
Yes,
that's, we're earning our keep as the Best of Halifax podcast. Shout out the guy who made Tunic.
The Halifax connection there, and I also bought the first 2 No More Heroes games again, and I'm slowly going through those. I played those back when I was when the Wii first came out, so I'm eager to try them again and see if they hold up, because I remember loving them when I was like 18 or 19, which was basically like the target audience for that game. But yeah, thank you very much for asking, Lucas, and that's a little bit of what's been going on. I've been really cranking out the movies, especially when I've got all this time to myself, so it's been a lot of fun. Our next one is from Caleb Cote. Caleb has some thoughts on the episode, which I will get to a little bit later. He also wanted to let us know he's decided to cast Arthur characters as Flintstone characters. So we got Binky as Fred, Buster as Barney, Sue Ellen as Wilma, Fern as Betty, Baby Kate as Pebbles, and the next one is weird, but Arthur is Bam Bam. All right. Pal is Dino, Ratburn is Mr. Slate. And just for fun, I also did the Arthur characters as the Warner siblings from Animaniacs. Buster as Wacko, DW as Dodd, and Binky as Yakko. Our next one is from Funith, who is confused why we found Muffy insufferable in the bird phobia episode, but not in Muffy Misses Out, where she's a total drama queen because her friends aren't useless without her, and it hurts her ego. Her friends even go so far as to stage a fake scenario to placate her sorry self. Well, Funith, all I can say is that I think the difference usually is that I think in Muffy Misses Out, it was a little bit funnier and it was a bit more at Muffy's expense, I suppose. Like, she was brought a little bit lower by everything. So that allows me to feel a little bit more sympathetic towards her. Versus the bird episode, I feel like it was more on the side of her being the antagonist of the episode, if I'm remembering these correctly.
Yeah, I think it's the dynamic between her and the kids. Like, part of the entertainment of the former is her receiving her comeuppance, right? Like,
yeah,
it's funny to watch her be so incensed. Like, it's a really funny joke to have someone be incensed that everything went fine without them. Like, her showing up and expecting a disaster, and everyone's like, oh, no, we didn't need you at all. That's inherently funny. Her trying to, like, kill an endangered species is just, like, annoying. Like, yeah. I don't know. There's nothing inherently funny about that dynamic. It was just kind of more so, oh, Muffy's the villain of this episode.
Right. Yeah. Next one's from Rowan. Dear Will and Lucas, I wanted to take a moment to express my gratitude for your podcast. I first discovered you through the Samurai Pizza Cast. Shout out to Andrew Power. Check out Andrew Power's comic, by the way. And since then, your show has become an essential part of my life. When I found it, it helped me through a particularly dark time. Now it's a weekly ritual I will look forward to, especially when I take my dog, Oso, for a walk. In fact, the moment he hears your theme song, he knows it's time for our big adventure to the park. Thank you for being a source of kindness, light, and laughter. I consider you two dear friends who brighten my world each week, even though we've never met, with sincere appreciation. Well, thank you, Rowan. Our last one here is from Kim Watson. Hello, Will, Lucas, and Mike. I discovered your podcast in November of 2022 after finishing all the available episodes of the official Arthur podcast. I have been steadily catching up on the ECL backlog and have finally reached present day. I enjoyed following the journey through the early years to the invasion of Mike, into and out of the pandemic, the dreaded Flash era, and now approaching the hashtag end of Arthur. I listen to ECL when walking my dogs, and they always appreciate getting longer walks when I have to finish just one more episode or segment. To celebrate catching up, I joined the Patreon and voted in the Best of Halifax Awards. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I may or may not be a proud resident of the Tim Hortons of Windsor, Ontario for the purposes of the awards voting. In reality, I'm about 30 minutes drive north of Windsor in the Detroit, Michigan suburbs. I try to make regular visits across the bridge to our neighbors to the south in Canada, mainly to eat a beaver tail pastry and stock up on Kinder Surprise eggs and ketchup-flavored potato chips, which we can't get in the U.S. My question for y'all is, as Canadians, what is your opinion on these fine culinary delicacies? Thanks for the many hours of good listening. Can't wait to start in on the Patreon content. So, Lucas, 3 of them here. Beaver tails. What do you think of beaver tails?
I'm not a fan of beaver tails. They're a little too sweet for me.
Yeah.
But it's a type of food that can only be eaten on a ski trip, as far as I'm concerned. Like, I feel like almost 100% of the beaver tails I've ever eaten was in a ski lodge that had a beaver tail station. Yeah. Otherwise, it's a little. I feel like I wouldn't have to skip lunch or something to get one of those down.
Even when I was younger, I agree. It was a little too much. Like, it's a lot to kind of handle, especially like I think of it being like downtown on the boardwalk, and it's like I don't want to carry around like a 2-hander hot dessert, you know? It's not my thing, really. What is my thing is Kinder Surprise. I love Kinder Surprise chocolates. I love getting Kinder Surprise eggs at Easter. I love Kinder Surprise bars. Thumbs up. Love them. Very tasty. What about you? Kinder.
I mean, I'm a fan of, sorry to our friends to the south, but Kinder Surprise is empirical proof that Europeans and Canadians are able to conceptualize that you're not supposed to eat the thing in the middle of the candy. Whereas the nanny state in the United States has prevented you guys from indulging in the Kinder Surprise because you seem to not be able to wrap your head around that concept, or at least your government seems to think that you guys are going to injure yourself on the toy on the inside.
Right.
But there is something weird about how, because the toy is kind of garbage. I almost always throw Kinder Surprise toys away.
Not great.
But there's something about that almost white milk chocolate that hits different, and because you don't get a lot of it, because it's made as a receptacle to house these toys, I don't know. It's been a while since I've had one, but I haven't had supper yet, Will, and I'm thinking about a Kinder Surprise right now, and I'm like, that sounds pretty good.
Yeah. And the last one, ketchup chips, not my favorite. I think of it sort of like root beer, where it's like, I don't buy root beer for myself. I don't enjoy it on its own. If it's at a party, sure. Like, if it's there, fine. I'll eat it. Same with ketchup chips. Like, I don't not like them, but I'm also not seeking them out.
Another big point of comparison with the United States, the United States has us beat hook, line, and sinker with their cereal selection, right? I was in the States recently for work, and I was like, this Travis Kelce cereal box that's 3 cereals mixed together, that's craziness, That would make your average Canadian's mind get blown. However, where we have the Americans absolutely positively cornered is in chip selection. No ketchup chips, no all dressed, no. I feel like they're dill pickles, not of the same candor.
No.
We have you guys totally beat. And don't even get me started about these weird, esoteric, grocery store exclusive flavors like turkey dinner and buffalo chicken wings.
Yeah.
So our chip selection is way more expansive. But I will concede, you guys, the cereal. Will, have you seen this Travis Kelce cereal?
I literally
insanity.
haven't. I've never heard of it before. I just looked it up. They can do that? Like, that's legal?
I know,
that's
it seems
legal?
illegal.
Yeah.
It seems like you should not be able to eat that. Imagine eating that first thing in the morning.
Oh. It wouldn't kill me, but it would hasten my death. Oh. Ugh. Even in this picture I'm looking at, it looks unappetizing. It just looks like something a cartoon would eat. Like, I don't know. It's too much. It's too much. Huh.
I think the real part that's upsetting me is the Reese Puffs. It's like weird to have like peanut butter mixed with. There's something odd about it all.
For me, it's the Lucky Charms. Like, I really think that like peanut butter and chocolate is one thing. Trying to put marshmallows in it, that's like dabbling in God's domain. I don't think that's
It's true. It's true. The promise of Lucky Charms is that, you know, the deal is, well, I get to eat marshmallows because the cereal sucks. Right? That's the deal you're making, the deal with the devil. It's like, well, it's okay that I'm eating marshmallows in the morning because the cereal sucks.
Right.
If you replace the crappy cereal with good cereal, I don't know, man. It's freaking me out just thinking about it. That's like a little...
It's too much. Like, you need to be tested. You need to go through the fire to get to the oasis on the other side, you know? You can't just have it all. We're teaching the wrong lessons.
I don't mean to be glib, but perhaps this is the product of two brothers with extensive head trauma from their athletic career. We're like, what if we mixed all the cereals together?
Yeah, like, it's the idea that like, it's like these two big huge guys. You know how they got big? By stuffing cereal down their gullet. Like, ugh, I don't know. I don't like it. But I'd be lying if I said I wouldn't try it. All right, thanks everybody for the emails. elwoodcitylimits@gmail.com. Really appreciate your correspondence. And we also appreciate our patrons over at patreon.com/ElwoodCityLimits. Of course, patrons have access to the final episode of For the Kids, where we talked about Mark Brown's latest cartoon, something sort of a follow-up to Arthur in Hop. So if you want to hear our thoughts on that, as well as every episode of For the Kids, then join patreon.com/ElwoodCityLimits. And, of course, we've got our new episode of ECL Origins coming out this month, which will be our last one of that as well. We'll let you know more about that at the end of the show. We also want to say thank you to those patrons who are supporting us there, including thank you to people like Stella, Joe Sue. Thank you to Muppet Baby Cat and Sierra S. Thank you to Lawrence and Ursula Cat. Thank you to Kirsten and Emmy the Ghost. Thank you to Rory Forever and Katie. Thank you, Derek Watson Jr., Nehemiah Unimuk, The Flying Sparks 32. Thank you to Peppy Roo, and thank you to Jared G. Thank you to our newest patron, that would be Reem Scally, and thank you as well to Quantum Wave. Welcome back to the Patreon. Patreon.com/ElwoodCityLimits. All right, this is it. The end of season 23. We're starting off with The Pea and the Princess. So this one is all about, of course, the Princess and the Pea. Prunella is the one who is directing and trying to put on a play that is it's just called The Pea. No, the Princess, it's just The Pea. Francine, in this cold open here, is very angry that Prunella has changed the name to take away emphasis from the Princess, who Francine seems to be playing, although there seems to be two of them. And in this cold open, accidentally knocks over a vase onto Prunella's ankle, or a vase, and hurts her ankle. So now what's going to happen? Lucas, it seems like this whole production is in total chaos.
Couple of things about the cold open. One, the poster for The Pea is awesome.
Yeah.
Really cool. And two, already this is off to a great start, and this remains consistent through the rest of the episode. But Binky in the Pea costume with his little green toque is so funny looking. And if that wasn't already funny in its own right, the first words out of his mouth in this cold open where Prunella breaks her ankle and he goes, "She broke her leg. The legends are true." That is one of many, many very funny Binky lines throughout this episode. P. Binky delivers throughout.
And just to describe, it is Binky in this basically giant green orb costume. It's he's a big P, you know? PEA, by the way, like the green that you eat. That's what you need to picture if you haven't seen the episode. So in the actual episode itself, Prunella is holding auditions for her play, and as the kind of artsy person on the cast next to like Fern or somebody, she's got a real vision for this. So in her version of The Princess and the Pea, Francine and Muffy are both cast as the princess, and Binky, of course, is the pea. We also see that Buster and Arthur are cast as the horse, to which Buster says dibs on the rear. And as we'll see later, I guess they couldn't decide who was going to be the front. I didn't think the rear was the part of the horse you would want to be in a horse costume.
I think that's the joke. Yeah, nobody wants to be the rear. You know, this whole setup is very reminiscent of a infamous early Arthur episode where Francine goes mad with power on that production of when the story of Thomas Edison. Mm-hmm. Who's playing the light bulb? Is it Buster?
Yeah, that's Buster. Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, we've talked about these later episodes, whether intentionally or unintentionally, where you can only tackle so many different storylines. They're kind of remixing and remaking previous concepts explored. And this kind of idea of the kids are putting on a play and there's conflict over, you know, leadership in the play. That's kind of what this episode's about, though with a very different kind of take. You know, that first episode is about Francine going mad with power, and this one tends to be more about differences in creative vision.
Yes, and Prunella is not put forth as the antagonist. She just has a, as I say, kind of different vision for all things. Her version of the play involves, yes, of course, two princesses and a pea that is animate and walks around, as we said, Binky in this costume, that is more important than the princesses to the play. That's why it's eventually called the Pea. Meanwhile, Arthur and Buster, in both trying to be the rear end, we get like a reverse cat dog situation going on here. So instead of two heads, we got two butts, and neither of them can really see. So it's just kind of a two-butted horse walking around and not doing all that much. But yes, Lucas, as you said, the conflict in this episode comes from the fact that Francine wants her role to be more significant. So she is, during the rehearsal, she's changing her lines, she's changing the blocking, she tries this big move where she swings onto a canopy and totally not called for and causes chaos, which leads Prunella to make some changes that result in a lesser role for Francine and more for Binky as the Pea, who she thinks is fantastic. Like, she is really enamored with the way Binky's rehearsal went, and she thinks that he's great.
We glossed over this, but again, the Binky stuff in this episode during the tryouts. Binky's audition, the way he delivers his lines is so weird. It's so crazy, and it's such a great detail of like Binky's voice actor just does a bang up job. It reminded me weirdly enough about like is her name Elizabeth Berkley, the girl from Showgirls?
Yes, Elizabeth Berkley.
Elizabeth Berkley, and how initially everybody was like, why does she talk like that? She's such a bad actress. And then, you know, as time has gone on, people see Paul Verhoeven's vision and you realize, oh, everything about that performance is totally intentional. Like, it's like weird on purpose. And that's kind of what this moment between Prunella and Binky reminded me of, where everybody's like, wow, Binky's audition was really bad. And Prunella's like, brilliant. Exactly what I'm looking for.
Yeah, she's looking for like almost an outsider art sort of thing. Not
Yes. A naturalistic performance.
Yes. So yeah, Francine has her own vision of this, which sees her changing the roles up, and then Binky ends up quitting. He's not interested in this, and he ends up being replaced with a tennis ball, which takes the heart right out of the play. And it's not just you and I who might think that. Francine's version of the play goes on. They have a performance for the preschoolers, which is sort of like a dress rehearsal, but it gets a very cold reception from the preschool audience, and it really doesn't work. And this is where we sort of enter to where the cold open was, because before everybody goes on at the big performance in front of their parents and everything that night, then all this stuff happens where Francine is kicking up a fuss and Binky's not there and Prunella hurts her ankle, and they have to do some like quick switcheroos. Like, Arthur is put into speaking role that he's not ready for, and Buster just has to be the horse on his own. When it all comes together like this, or rather doesn't come together, Francine realizes that her vision is not as good as Prunella's. Really, maybe that's me editorializing, but it's just like she apologizes. They change it back to the original version. It goes over even better. In fact, it leads to Binky, who is kind of sulking at home. They have to run to his house to go get him, and Binky, still in his pea costume, by the way, sprints all the way to the auditorium to do his part in the rain, and he even gets like a topical like zinger in there. Like he's kind of doing a bit of crowd work along with his role as the pea.
Yeah, and anything he delivers as the pea. At some point, I can't remember if this is the dream sequence or if this is actually in the text of the play, but when he goes, "Woe is me, a wee little pea, tossed and turned in a tornado," it's just his delivery. It's so odd, and it really works.
Really, the only other note I have for this is that this conflict is resolved instantly. And to compare it to the episode you were talking about, which Francine Frensky Superstar, all about how Francine is a dictator of a director. And once again, the blame is on Francine here, but it's as an actor. Prunella is not really at fault here. It's more Francine who has to apologize, but is quickly accepted. Everything goes over well. All fine and good. Was there anything else that I missed? My notes are a little sparse for this one. I'll get into why at the end of the episode.
Yeah, I mean, there's just some great lines from Binky. You know, you're replacing me with a tennis ball. That is not Prunella's vision.
And now, a word from us kids. Once again, closely related to what we just talked about, we have kids who are in an improv class at Improv Boston. So they do all kinds of different prompts. They do the 7-line story game. They do kind of like freezes, this sort of theater games. Like I did this one time. I did like a theater games class at a local rec center. It actually made me miss drama class. In high school, we had drama class, and I wish I had gone further with it. I do kind of miss doing fun stuff like this.
I gotta say, Will, these kids are probably better than your average. I bet this was funnier because they're kids and kids are cute.
Yes.
This was probably a better show than your average improv performance. That was my thought. Watching them perform improv, I was like, wow, this actually kind of works because it's a bunch of 7-year-olds as opposed to like a 33-year-old man being like, okay, and who's got a job? Okay, and yeah. I'm Joe Biden. And I was like, this is actually kind of endearing watching these kids do this, as opposed to if I had to watch a bunch of adults do this, and I'm like, oh God, where's the fire exit? Get me out of here.
Well, in improv, I always get really nervous just because there is a much higher probability of just falling on one's face. I prefer to watch it not in a crowd, but like on YouTube when it's already been like, no, this was good. Like, trust us, this is actually funny. Instead of watching it happen live, I just get too anxious about it. There was a really good one. They had a prompt where it was like a really bad teacher, and one of the kids who's like a little girl comes up and she just goes, "Get a job!" Like, tremendous delivery. Thought that was really funny.
Supporting this podcast is how it keeps going, and it's very easy to do. So here's how you can do that. If you're listening to this show and want to get the full back catalog of Elwood City Limits and all of its sister shows and offshoots, you can listen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, and even more services. You can also go to our YouTube page, youtube.com/Elwood City Limits, for the full back catalog. If we aren't on a service you use, please let us know. You can interact with us on social media. We're on Twitter @ECL Podcast, Instagram @Elwood City Limits, and twitch.tv/Elwood City Limits Pod for our occasional streams. We're also on Facebook and Tumblr. Feel free to reach out to us on social media, or you can email us, and your email might be read on the show, elwoodcitylimits@gmail.com. Finally, for exclusive content including entire side series like For the Kids, a PBS Kids podcast, and ECL Origins, subscribe to us for as little as $1 a month at patreon.com/Elwood City Limits. That's all for now. Thanks a lot for listening, and now back to the show.
And now back to Arthur.
And the second half of our season finale is DW and Dr. Whosit. Lucas, can you imagine a world where anyone was allowed to do anything at any age?
Okay, so this cold open might be my favorite part of this whole episode.
Uh-oh.
Because I was like, wow, a world where anyone could do anything at any age. And where the characters they decide to use and the things they decide to make them do in this cold open are so funny. I was like really taken aback with like just great joke setup. So the first one is Baby Kate as a pilot of an airplane. Hilarious concept. Baby piloting airplane. Brilliant. And I was like, wow, they really started with a bang. How could it get better? Oh, it gets better because everybody's favorite yokel, everybody's favorite rube, Bud, is managing the Reeds' finances, and he invests them all. What does he invest them in? Like monkeys and bubblegum or something?
Stuffed monkeys or something.
Hearing Bud be like, I invested all your money in monkeys and bubblegum. I was like, mwah, magnifique. This is so good. It got a hearty chuckle out of me because it's true. I didn't even have to hear what he did. The horror of Bud being in control of your finances. Probably the last. I'd rather Baby Kate. They're probably the last person I would want in control of my bank account. So this was really good stuff. You know, you don't want a baby driving your plane, and you don't want Bud in charge of your checkbook. And then eventually, the Tibbles doing surgery. That's great stuff. That's horrifying. That's like Cronenberg's Dead Ringers or something.
Now I'm just imagining two Jeremy Irons as the Tibble twins. DW, you thought that Dr. Whosit was this. It's Dead Ringers. What a reference. Oh. And this is also happening while DW is trying to make pancakes with a whole lot of flour, eggs, ketchup, and banana peels. DW should not be cooking. She doesn't have aptitude for cooking at a young age. This leads us into the episode, which is Arthur and Buster and all of their friends are way into a program called Dr. Whosit. And when I read the title of this, and it was like DW is interested in a show that's older, or that's for older audiences. I still didn't get it. And then they were like, Doctor Who. Oh, of course, Dr. Whosit. And like I've been watching Doctor Who semi recently. I watched the new series. I get Doctor Who videos recommended in my YouTube. I've been watching those. So, like, I can't believe it didn't hit me until, like, literally on the screen. It's like Doctor Who's it, and they've got the what is it? It's a mailbox instead of a telephone box. And so if you're like me and you're not sure, Doctor Who's It is a parody of the long-running British sci-fi show Doctor Who. And when this aired in 2019, we had our first female playing the Doctor, Jodie Whittaker. So it was still on TV. It was still relevant. People were still talking about it. It's actually a pretty good time to be making this parody. I just wish they did more with it. We barely see the episode. And what we do hear about it doesn't really match up with my experience with Doctor Who.
I'm glad you are talking about all this stuff, because I have written in my notes, I defer to Will in regards to the Doctor Who parody material. Because I really, listen, I've been on the internet for a while, Will. I know about pop culture. There's a British guy, the thing is bigger on the inside, sonic screwdriver, exterminate, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah.
And that's basically where it grinds to a halt for me. So I'm happy to have you as kind of our resident Doctor Who expert.
Buddy, I was on Tumblr during Super Wholock.
I
know
you were in the trenches.
Yeah, I know a thing or two about a thing or two. It almost cost me my life. All of the kids Arthur's age are into this. And we know this because when DW is kind of going around town, she sees Arthur and Buster. The thing that they do to communicate that people are into Doctor Who's It is that there's a line that they all say, and it has like accompanying hand motions, and it's, "Egad, the Doctor has flibbered." I'm like, what the hell are they talking about? I can't think of anything. Like, every Doctor kind of has a catchphrase, but it's usually like a word, like Allons-y or Geronimo or whatever. And it's not, they don't always have to hit it. It's like, "Egad, the Doctor has flibbered." It sounds like somebody who's never heard of Doctor Who being like, guess this? and the like hand signs. It's almost like it's a show for children as opposed to a show for. It's Doctor Who's meant to be more of a show for families. It's very child friendly, but there's a little bit about it that's intense, which is what this episode of Arthur is about, because Arthur and Buster are watching it, a bunch of people are watching it, and DW is curious about it. She thinks it's weird. She thinks everybody in town who is talking about it, what does she call it? She doesn't call it hipposis or something. Dad Reed is also like, oh, I've heard about that. Your mother and I are going to watch that. And DW's like, cool, I'd like to watch as well. And Dad has to say that, no, I'm sorry, you can't be watching it. You're too little. Which, of course, is annoying to DW because she doesn't get the inside joke that everybody else seems to know. This also is communicated, the whole thing of not knowing an inside joke. Apparently, DW and Bud made up a song at one point called Sparkly Ega, and it was their inside joke, and it really annoyed Arthur. We never get an explanation of what it is, but even just bringing it up, DW is already annoying Arthur. At one point also here, we see that, I'm sorry, I forget which character has this, but they talk about that they're eating a pizza muffin, and that just kind of stopped me in my tracks from what I was watching. Like, I know that, like, pizza bagels exist, there's pizza buns, but pizza muffin?
Just pizza muffin sounds good to me.
I know.
I'll take a savory pastry any day of the week.
Sure, but, like, I don't know. It's the whole kind of nature of muffin. Is it muffin dough? Or like, yeah, just the crumbly nature. I don't know if that really lends itself to a pizza. So I was a little distracted by that going through this episode that I wrote it down. DW is trying to find out more about this. Bud doesn't watch it because, again, he's too young. And the Tibble twins, Jeremy Irons and Jeremy Irons, give DW wrong information about the show. And she makes a fool of herself in front of Arthur and Buster when she tries to pose like she has seen it. There's a whole thing of like, what is the fruit that she brings up? And Buster's like, there's none of that on the show. What are you talking about? It's like pomegranates.
Oh, I don't
something.
Remember either. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, there was talk of pomegranates later
on.
Oh,
yeah, that's
Bud's,
right.
Guacamole.
Oh. Yeah, hang on. We're getting there. DW is determined to watch this show, tries to sneak it one night when Mom and Dad are watching, but they bring her back to bed. So she tries to watch the recording that they made of Dr. Whosit, but she can't get past the parental lock. So her and Bud have to enlist a plan to watch the show. So Bud, in this plan, is pretending to be hungry so that he can distract Dad Reed, while DW gets the password from the Reed Family Password Book, which is a binder of all their passwords.
Okay, when did this episode come out? You know, this video was posted 4 years ago.
2019.
2019. Get these people one password, okay? Get these people a password manager, okay?
Right.
It's 2019. We do not need to have a binder. What am I, in a point-and-click adventure game? What am I, playing Deus Ex? I'm going to hack into the Reed family's computer? Pay for a 1Password subscription, people. What's going on here? I'm going to install malware on the Reed family computer and steal their tax information. What the hell is this? They got a binder full of passwords? Anyway, continue.
No, I think that's worth bringing up. It is unusual in this day and age. For this plan, Dad Reed is putting together a type of guacamole, and he suggests adding pomegranate seeds to it. Now, this is another, Lucas, would you eat this? And I'm expecting that you might say yes. I will just say that I personally don't like guacamole. I don't care for it. I'm not a huge avocado fan. So I don't know if pomegranate seeds, it feels like it would take away from the flavor, but what do I know? I don't eat the stuff.
It's not really a flavor thing. It's more of a texture thing. Pomegranate seeds are really hard and crunchy, and I don't really want them in my guac. So this is actually a rare no for me. I like my, I'm the opposite of Bud, which great line from Bud. Good use of Bud in this episode.
How about that?
Where Bud goes, he goes, I love guacamole, especially when complicated things are added to it. That's good Bud humor right there. But unlike Bud, I kind of like my guac as simple as possible. Avocado and minimal other elements. Some onion perhaps.
Sure.
But yeah, no pomegranate seeds for I. But this whole bit of Bud kind of partitioning Dad Reed to make a complicated guacamole, this is a good conceit to kind of get him out of the room. It's funny.
And then Bud sneaks out of the room. He and DW, their password, by the way, is pal_1_2. That's at least one of their passwords. And that's the password for the parental lock on the TV. They watch a little bit of the show. We don't really see it, which is a missed opportunity. And they do get a little bit scared of what they are watching. And Dad finds them out, and he says, "Egad, the dad is mad." And the consequence for this, as we wrap up this episode, is that DW, in the end, she saw it, and she didn't even like the show. So it really wasn't even all that worth it. But she now knows that she's not missing anything. DW gets punished with no TV for a week, and Arthur also can't watch the show anymore either. So I think that's as a result of just being like, of Mom and Dad just being like, not crazy about our 8-year-old watching this either. So I guess that's the consequence there. Arthur didn't really do anything wrong, but he's suffering for this too. And there it is. Season 23 is in the books. Lucas, let's go back to, first of all, the Pea and the Princess. It sounds to me that you liked this a lot more than I did.
Yeah, I was a fan of the Pea and the Princess for two reasons. One, anytime we saw Binky in the pea costume, and every time he opened his mouth, it made me laugh. And an Arthur episode that makes me laugh throughout is always going to be one that's in my good graces. The other thing is, I kind of liked, it's a very similar setup to that previous episode we were talking about where, Francine was kind of being a megalomaniac in her production. And this is kind of a different message. The message of this one is, sometimes you need to trust the process, and someone can have a creative vision that doesn't make sense to you, but it doesn't mean that it's not the right creative vision to produce a good piece of art, which, again, is a moral I was not expecting Arthur to ever tackle. And so this kind of outside message, I thought it did well, and it did entertainingly. So I enjoyed the Pea and the Princess.
I'm glad that you did. It really seems like you got more out of it than I did. And not to say that I disliked it necessarily, I just kind of thought it was whatever. My expectations were a little bit higher given the episodes that came before this one. So in both cases, I mean, not to get ahead of myself here, but it was sort of a, yeah, it's all right. Like, I think you definitely were entertained and found it a bit more funny than I did. Yeah, like, I don't have anything against it. I'm glad that you brought up the whole remix thing. I wasn't even thinking of that when watching it. And, there's a couple of good lines. I like the Binky costume, but yeah, I just thought it was kind of okay. And really, ditto for DW and Dr. Whosit. I'd say I'm a little bit more disappointed in DW and Dr. Whosit because I just don't think that the concept of Dr. Whosit was explored enough. And I really think that there was fertile ground for Arthur-style parody. And I think that, other than seeing that, it's a mailbox instead of a telephone box, I wish that they had done more with that. And also, it feels like the episode kind of just ends. It doesn't really have a satisfying through line to see through, other than DW realizing she wasn't missing anything. I'm just like, all right, well, lesson learned, I guess. Yeah, I don't know. It was again, I would probably rate this a little bit below the Pea and the Princess, but yeah, both very much in the middle for me.
DW and Doctor Who's it? I'm of two minds because I don't really care about Doctor Who. It wasn't my favorite episode in the world, but there is something that this episode gestures towards that I thought was really engaging, which is the idea of, I remember being a kid. I was the kind of kid, this might come as shocking to you, but I was the kind of kid where my parents were kind of strict with what I could watch and what I couldn't watch.
Okay.
I wasn't allowed to watch Simpsons when I was a kid.
Yeah, me neither.
This feeling of kind of being left out, and specifically this instance of you're too young to watch a show, it made me nostalgic. It's not something I had seen portrayed in media before. And though picking Doctor Who as its subject matter is kind of a weird, this would be another prime time for Arthur to bust out its South Park parody or something, right?
Yeah.
But it does kind of capture effectively this feeling. And DW's emotions in here, sometimes it's, we're grown men, Will. How much do we have to relate to DW? And the genius of the DW character is that, as annoying as we all find her because, we're adults and everybody's like, wow, she's so misbehaved. It's like, okay, guys, she's 4.
Yeah.
But the genius of the DW character is that we were all 4 at some point, and there should be a little bit of us all in DW, right? And so this was one of those times where I was really empathizing with DW's position, and I remembered this feeling, and it really does capture it. I'm not saying that this is a good episode, but it touched something in me that I haven't felt in an Arthur episode in a while, where I was like, wow, this is really transporting me to a time and place. I'll also say it's bookended by 2 great Bud jokes, with Bud doing the people's taxes. It's probably the best use of Bud we've ever seen on the show. Bravo. I've come around. As number 1 Bud hater, I never wanted to see the guy again. He was driving me crazy. Making fun of the horror, Will. Think about it. Think about you're in a meeting with TD Bank and Bud's sitting across from you. It's like, it's totally shocking. So that I really enjoyed. I really enjoyed the bit with him in the guacamole. Totally middling, kind of forgettable episode, but some interesting stuff to talk about. So not I don't know. I in talking about it, it's one of those ones where I find it more interesting than I did when I was watching it.
Well, you seem to be quite a bit kinder to the episode than I was, and that's very interesting. I would pay money for Bud's voice actor. Like, I'd pay cameo prices to have Bud's voice actor say TD Milosh Monix in the Bud voice. I would love it. Well, there you have it. Season 23 is all wrapped up, and there's only one thing left for us to do when we finish up an Arthur season. That's our season recap. And that's going to be for everything. Lucas, I know you weren't here for this episode, but you are going to be watching When Duty Calls before we get up to our recap.
Yes.
And as I said to you after we finished the episode, I was like, you got to watch this. So I'm really interested in what you're going to have to say and where it will rank in our top 3 episodes of season 23 and our general thoughts when we get the recap to you. That's going to be the next thing you're going to hear from us here on Elwood City Limits. So a couple of other things. First of all, skipping ahead to season 24 a little bit, when we had a free week in September and there was nothing coming down the pike, I decided to skip ahead a little bit in the schedule of, we're chronologically covering all these Arthur episodes, and I decided to finally bear down and finish a project that I've had on the books for a couple of months. And you can now see it on our YouTube, youtube.com/Elwood City Limits. It's our first and probably only video episode about the season 24 version of The Great McGrady. So we are not going to be doing a proper podcast episode on that episode because we've already done one before. You should listen to our old one anyway. I go into it all in the video. If you want the comparisons between both episodes, you can watch this video in between the other 2 episodes of season 24. You can watch it now. youtube.com/Elwood City Limits. I put a good chunk of work into it. I'm quite proud of it, and I hope that you like it, and I would love your feedback on it as well. So go ahead and check that out. That's going to be one of the newest releases on our YouTube channel, and that will also sub for the middle of season 24. So really, with season 24 on the way, we're only going to be covering 2 episodes. This is going to be our shortest season ever. That's on the way.
And Will, I got to give you your roses on that. I didn't even know that you were putting that together, and if you told me, I had forgotten. And so it really just popped up in my feed out of nowhere, and I was like, whoa, Will really cooked on this one. I didn't know you had that kind of video editing prowess. So congrats to you, Will, for putting that out. I know you're a big fan of the video essay as a format, and I think you did a bang-up job. So yeah, folks, I really recommend you check that out. And I know we talked about it at the top, folks, but vote.thecoast.ca. Head on down to, what are we in, the lifestyle section?
Arts and culture.
We got to really tell them what section. Arts and culture. Head on down to the arts. And what is more arts and culture than Arthur, folks? Come on. We're all here because we know that Arthur is art. And so if you want to prove that to the people at the coast, head on down to vote.thecoast.ca.
Vote.thecoast.ca.
And give your friends at Elwood City Limits. It costs nothing. You just got to put an email address in and say that you live in our area code, and boom, you might help us live our dreams of getting a fun plaque and going to a fun party.
Let's hope so. And there's still plenty of time, no matter where you're listening to this episode. There's one other thing before we end off here. Of course, our last episode of ECL Origins is coming up for the end of October. And so, Lucas, it couldn't be anything other than this. It really couldn't. It's where our friendship started. Before Arthur, we were thinking, what can we make a podcast about? And we're finally going to do it. I know this isn't going to be to everyone's taste. There will be a certain segment of our audience who may have been waiting for this for years. Lucas, ECL Origins for October, our last episode of ECL Origins, we're going to be talking about professional wrestling.
I often think too, sometimes, Will, I'm only a human. I name search. I look up what people are saying about Elwood City Limits on the Arthur subreddit.
Yep.
And I think my favorite Reddit comment about us of all time is, it's a great podcast when they shut the hell up about WWE. And to that intrepid Reddit user, I'm sorry, but guess what? Excuse me. Guess what? It's our show. And it is an integral part of the Elwood City Limits origin story. And to all of you, you should actually thank your lucky stars that there are so many wrestling podcasts, because this was almost a wrestling podcast. And then we realized there was 100 wrestling podcasts and not one Arthur one, so we went with Arthur. So guess what? Me and Will are going to finally live our dream of hosting a wrestling podcast when we talk about professional wrestling on the final episode of ECL Origins. I can't wait.
Like 1997, one night only. So patrons, look forward to that at the end of October.
Probably set to be our most annoying episode of ECL Origins yet. If you guys really like me and Will having fun at your expense, get ready, buckle up.
Yeah, I'm really excited for it too. It's going to be a great time. And of course, so we've got ECL Origins coming at the end of October. We're talking about wrestling. We've got the Season 23 recap coming your way next. And then we're going to be getting into Season 24, which, as I said before, is going to be the shortest of all of our seasons. There's only 2 episodes. We're going to be starting and ending basically within a 2-week period there, 2 or 3 week period. And it starts off with George scraps his sculpture and Arthur's big meltdown. Again, go to youtube.com/Elwood City Limits if you want to see our video essay content there. I gained a whole new respect for video essayists and people who make content on YouTube from what I did. And hey, pro tip, if you want to be able to save your work, don't use Microsoft Clipchamp. That's all I had access to. Wasn't great, wouldn't recommend. Anyway, there's so much for you to check out. And if you're a patron, there's so much more to see. We're going to be, not to get too ahead of ourselves, but we will be letting you know what's going to be happening with the Patreon and everything and the show itself as we draw closer to the end. We're so close to a new season, and we're very close to saying ta-ta, but not yet. We've still got plenty more fun to have. It's great to be back, and it's great to be here. So thank you for being here with us. Thank you for listening to this episode of Elwood City Limits. My name's Will Young, and for Lucas Mancini,
Prunella, don't you think I'm a little big to be a P?
We'll see you next time.